Hello everyone, I hope you are keeping well. In this session, this is our last session basically. So in this session we are going to discuss the health, population and development, or population then health and development. Several aspects of how health or several health indicators uh, are important in terms of making a development, in terms of say health is good, lower the mortality rate, higher the expectancy, and health is good in the one term also means that if lower the child mortality or infant mortality, lower will be the birth and the number of population, or the population growth rate is also lower, and then it has an implication towards the countries or societies development. So we will try to understand the population size, the variations in terms of population composition, and how it is connected with health, and then further other way, how these population variations or compositions have an effect on the development as such. So I will try to start my lecture with the subject called demography. In demography, we talk, demos is population, graphy is science. So it's basically the population sciences, or the studies which the studies on population or human population. Yeah. So that is demography. And as you know, the development is for the population, therefore development is directly associated with population. Population causes development, development brings changes to the population or to the people. The most prominent theory related to demography and and economic development is associated with the birth rate and death rate. Yes, birth rate and death rate along with migration causes changes in population size and composition, causes changes in population size and composition, and this change determine the level of development. Again, this level of development brings changes to the birth rate and death rate. So the theory we are talking about is known as demographic transition theory, or the demographic transition, or the theories of demographic transition theory. So what it says, it basically has 4 stages. Yeah, this demographic transition has 4 stages. So on the x-axis we measure time, and with time of course economic development. Yes, with time we are developing, right? With time we will measure economic development, and over here we will estimate birth rate and death rate. Yes. So what happens in the first stage of development? So I will just break it into 4 compartments. Yes. So this is my stage 1, stage 2, stage 3 and stage 4. In the first stage, it is the development is very poor, a high level of infectious diseases, high mortality rate, very low life expectancy, right? And in that, as people have uncertainty about how many will live, and then also in that level of development, society is strong if they have number in their favor. The larger the society, they are more strong. Therefore, one is to ensure the the number of family size against a high death rate, so they will give birth to a large number of children. So that is what, and no idea about no idea about contraception, no idea about uh, better health or better education. So naturally the birth rate, the birth rate will be high, because there is no investment basically against the children, and then the death rate is of course high with that, famine, war, natural calamities and all. So at this condition, both of these, if this is my death rate is high, and I will see that what happens in the second stage. So in the second stage, with the with the scientific development, slowly the death rate starts falling, which has it has different time period for different countries. In Western countries, maybe it has started taking place post 1850s, or all the industrial revolution in Britain and all other Western European countries or USA. At the same time, in India, probably it has only taken place in 1950s. Yeah, so the death rate has started falling down in the second stage of development, or with the time. In the third stage, we see the death rate is again falling, but the fall has declined, the rate of decline has reduced. That's primarily because it is already reaching a minimum level, and in the last stage it has reached a minimum level, that the death rate, as far as it was possible to avoid by the sciences, it has done so, and people has to die. So the death rate will be positive, but it will be low. On the contrary, what happens with the birth rate? What happens with the birth rate? It will be little up and down, it can eventually, but the death rate, I can eventually show the death rate as up and down. So whichever way you like. So there is, yeah, so and I will keep the birth rate as same. So straight line, and then what happens is, with this at a first stage where there is a high birth rate because of the high death rate, but it takes time to realize that the death rate is falling down, or the people's life expectancy is increasing. It takes time to realize that. So, and birth is a behavioral process. So just understanding, oh my God, I am living more, or my children are living more, so let's not reproduce any more child. So really doesn't make sense, and it makes sense when it is given time, so that people start realizing the impact of a higher population size. So what happens in the second stage, when the birth rate starts falling, the death rate doesn't really fall. So and death rate starts being high. In the third stage, it falls. In the third stage, it falls like this, rapidly. Yeah. Whereas in the fourth stage, again, either way it can be something like this, and hence this one is my birth rate. This one is my death rate, and this period, this area is known as natural increase or natural growth, because the birth rate is high and then the death rate is low. What we have seen in, say, maybe post 1970s, or around 1970s or 1950, maybe 1940 to 1980, something like that. And slowly the birth rate is coming down. We are in the third stage now as a country in India. We are in the third stage. Sub-Saharan African countries, maybe they are still in the second stage. All developing countries, they are in the fourth stage, where both the birth rate and death rate is low. Eventually it can be birth rate is lower than the death rate in countries like Japan, so where the growth rate is negative basically. So more people are dying as compared to the rate of birth. So this is all about demographic transition. With the demographic transition, in tandem with this demographic transition, the disease pattern also changes. So how this disease pattern changes, that is explained by the theory of epidemiological transition given by Omran. Theory of theory of epidemiological transition. Now, what this theory says? This theory says again they follow the same, 4 stages. Over here you can keep time and level of development, and over here maybe the vital rates, prevalence rates and all this. And what we see that in this stage 1, now I will change the color, stage 2, stage 3 and stage 4. Yes, so when there is this high death rate and high birth rate, and then death rate falls, and then and then birth rate is something like this, continues, falls, and then so when there is high death rate, so this is my birth rate, this is my death rate. At the first stage, this is the pestilence and famine. This is the stage of pestilence and famine. In this stage where there is high birth rate and high death rate, it has also been seen that there is a high prevalence of famines, infectious disease, pestilence and all this. People are, once they are affected by some infectious disease, there is no immunization, nothing, no awareness, and people don't really live after they are affected by the disease, So what happens is, in the first stage, naturally, because of this pestilence and famine, this is natural growth. I will change. So because of this pestilence and famine, the number of death is high. Eventually, in the second stage, this is receding pandemics. With this, evolution of medical sciences, with betterment of medical system, with more learning. So in the second stage, the pandemic starts declining, and you can see this has eventually been reflected by the declining death rate, isn't it? So this receding pandemics, and then the third stage is degenerative and man-made diseases. This is degenerative and man-made diseases. Now what does this mean? This means degenerative, people don't die, they live with these diseases, and man-made is because of my lifestyles, the cardiovascular disease, the type 2 diabetes, the cancer, because of the nutrition, the smoking, the pollution, the stress, that kind of work we do, no physical exercise, the kind of food, the fat based food and all this. So we slowly have started evolving, started being affected by this man-made diseases, which are also known as NCD or non-communicable diseases, right? So after this receding pandemics, when these infectious diseases, malnutrition are past, then these new kind of problems arrive, which is happening in India right now, right? And then the fourth stage is delayed degenerative diseases. And emerging infections, and scientists have seen that in the fourth stage new kind of infections may arrive, and say nowadays we are being affected by the swine flu, or lot of these dengue cases, different types of HIV/AIDS were still there in some countries, are still there in some countries. Forget about HIV/AIDS, Ebola Ebola virus was there. So different kinds of new infections are arriving, and these new infections are arriving also because of the climate change. Say malaria. Malaria is prevalent now in Europe. It's unimaginable. So and this is the epidemiological transition, and these four are the four stages of epidemiological transition. With the course of development, we see another change, another kind of transition, that is known as nutrition transition. so which is associated with epidemiological transition. This nutrition transition says with the development, the first one was high physical exercise, only hunted gathered food, no cultivation. In the second stage the cultivation prevails, the agriculture starts getting improved or starts prevailing, and people have started taking a more of cereal based food, cooked home cooked cereal based food. Lot of mandatory exercises, it has not really come down. On the other hand, in the third stage, it's like more of fat based food, sedentary lifestyle, technical lifestyle, westernization, urbanization, ready made salt sugar based food, soft drinks and all this, and which causes this non communicable diseases, right? And then the fourth stage is behavioral change. Then people realize that we have been taking a lot of bad taken up a lot of bad healthy behavior, so which is basically unhealthy, and then we took a lot of junk foods which are not nutritious. We never did exercise for a long time. So there is that self induced exercise and self motivated diet practices or diet regimes. Says people take more of a salad, pure juice, fruits and all these things. Yeah, so this is the behavioral change. So these are the four stages. Yeah, so which this nutrition transition says along with this theory of epidemiological transition. And now, having said that, when we talk this, talk about this natural growth, so it certainly changes the age-sex composition of the population, which is it changes the population's age-sex composition. Why it changes the population's age-sex composition? That's primarily because when there is a high birth rate and low death rate, so lot of young people will be there, right? Lot of young people, and then a lot of death has come down, especially death at the child mortality rate, infant mortality rate has come down along with improvement in maybe the life expectancy, but more than that, life expectancy at elder ages, but more than that, average life expectancy at birth has increased by a lot of margin. So but then the number of birth has not come down. So this area contributes towards the natural growth and which changes the population's sex composition. If there is any sex preference, then that is a different story altogether. But these age sex compositions are generally represented by a population pyramid. This population pyramid gives us an idea about the, these are all 5-year age groups, say 0 to 4, 5 to 9, 10 to 14, and maybe here 80 plus. Yes, and then we have on the right, always females are right, so on the right we have female, on the left we have male, and then we have, say, this is a population pyramid. This is a population pyramid of a developing country. Why? There is a large number of young people, a high birth rate, right? If we kind of try to see what is the population of a developed country, say for Japan, the population pyramid will be something like this, something like this. A population pyramid. So that means that the birth rate you see is very low for the males and for the females as well. Yeah, these are different age groups, 0 to 4, 5 to 9, 10 to 14, 15 to 19 and so on till 85 plus maybe. And then this is the population size over here. This side females, this side females, this side males, and then we see that those who are taking birth, here they are dying, right? Over here nobody is dying, so here there is a high, it's getting short, squeezed and then sharp, flat, so that means that there is a lot of death in these young days, but here nobody dies in the young days. So you can see how the it's not really looking like a typical pyramid what we expect. So this changing its structure is again both way related to socio-economic conditions. The socio-economic conditions lead to the change in birth and death, and then the birth and death leads to the change in population size, and then population size leads to the again development, and thus an impact on the socio-economic condition of that particular society or the population. Now, once we see that here we can clearly earmark maybe three groups. One can be this group, one can be this group. So this is like elderly people. If this is our children, then these are our dependent population, right? Both elderly and children, they are our dependent population, isn't it? Yes, and this is the working class. This is the working class people. So we can estimate an age dependency ratio as population aged 0 to 14 years plus population, you can keep it 60 and above or 65 and above, 60 years plus, divided by working population age, population aged 15 to 60 years, I will say, yeah, more than 60 years, 60 years plus, yeah, more, and 15 to 60 years. So this gives an idea about the age dependency ratio. The more the dependency is, one thing is that the country has to pay up, the larger section of the GDP goes to the social security. Yes, that's primarily because they they need to support these young children as well as their education, their health, immunization, so on and so forth. Similarly, the elderly people, they don't have work now, they have a lot of medical expenses, they have to be supported, or if they are being supported by the families, that means the family's large income is not being invested or being either being invested or being utilized in a productive manner, but they are actually supporting the elderly individuals in their home. So that means it is not coming back to the economy in a positive manner. Yeah, so the so it's not a good sign or healthy sign of a society. So that means the developing the society is still in a developing phase or underdeveloped. In a developed country, the again in a not a very developed in today's scenario, but in countries where the population 15 to 60 years and this ratio is not very high, that means they are going to be economically stable. What happens in countries like Japan and all, this age dependency ratio again is high, but that is not basically there are two instances. As one, I say the child dependency ratio and elderly dependency ratio. Child dependency ratio is high in low and middle income countries. Elderly dependent ratio is high in developed countries. Because of lower birth rate, high in developed countries. Because of the lower birth rate, and not many people are actually substituting the working population. So there is a dearth of working population, and then the people are living for a long time. So that means those who are taking birth, even if that proportion is small, the number is small, they are living, they are living beyond their 60 years. And then there is a elderly support which is very critically needed and very large in nature. Therefore, but these two has a negative impact on the economy. Right? This has both of these have a negative impact on the economy. So what happens when I come here, or maybe the previous graph, if I can show the consumption chart. Say I am showing the consumption chart. So what happens over here, the consumption chart is pretty low, right? Because nobody, the people don't have many choices, the desire is low, they are just, and there is no formal market economy. So people just exchange things, and then with not much possession, that exchange also is not very possible at a high level. And on top of that, when this, at this primitive societies, there is again no formal economy, no formal market, and that is where the consumption level is also very low. Yeah, and then it goes very high, and then it starts increasing, and then it may increase, and it may eventually fall. The same thing happens with the total population. The population number increases and then falls. So anyways, that is shown by over here, and then it falls. But this is the consumption, the level of consumption, the market economy. Anyways, for these particular populations, both if this is high, the level of consumption both at the micro level and the macro level is high. Similarly, if this population is high, again the consumption is high, and then the production which is coming from this population is low. Because if this population is low and these populations are high, then the a larger share of this population's income is going to feed these people, so which is not really desired. So there should be a proper balance. So if there should be a proper balance, that is basically we can explain it in terms of total fertility rate. I'm not telling you the the definitions of different fertility or mortality measurements, but this total fertility rate says that in a simplistic form, nothing in a very simple form, it says that when or the average number of children. It's not this simple, yeah, average number of children per mother, right, or per woman of a particular age. Yeah, it's generally of a reproductive age, or per, I will just mention that, per woman in the reproductive age group. And then it's like if they don't die during their reproductive age group, they follow a same fertility and mortality chart, a specific fertility rate, and all these assumptions are there. But this is the average number of children per woman in an age, reproductive age group. And we also have a concept of below or replacement fertility level. That is when one the one couple has two children, and those two children are replacing their mother, and this replacement fertility level is known as when TFR is 2.1, total fertility rate is 2.1. Why 2.1? Why not exactly 2? This 0.1 is basically not everybody marries, or not everybody can get a child, right? Or sometimes maybe the children are dying, so all these things. So this 0.1 is that extra. But once they reach this 2.1 level, so the economy is developed, so this child mortality rate and infant mortality rate goes down. So this 0.1 is basically for those who don't marry or don't have children or something like that. Anyways, so now having giving you this idea, or maybe the previous idea, this how this negative income impact on the economy, takes place because of these dependency ratios, child dependency ratio or elderly dependency ratio. You can multiply, or it can be out of total population and percentage, in terms of percentage, that elderly dependent percentage, in terms of rate and all, rate of elderly population. Anyways, so this kind of, the impact of its composition on a particular economy uh, can eventually be very helpful if a country has a high number of working age population, right? Because if there is a high number of working age population, then this population is high, and then these dependents are low, so the country will improve economically, and that's primarily because a lot of income is being generated and not much consumption towards, unproductive consumption towards supporting children and elderly. So but this is a transition phase between a very low development and very high development phase. This is known as demographic dividend. Demographic dividend. So it's a window of opportunity in a society, or in the development of a society, in the development of a society, which opens up when fertility rates decline faster, and fertility rates decline faster, and already you have the economically able population with low mortality rate, but combined with effective policies and markets. See, in India, we say that we are in the, there is a lot of debate, policies and markets. We say that we are enjoying the demographic dividend, but we are not. That's because we have seen that in our kind of research, that we have seen that even if the number of working population is growing, but their employability is not high, and even if the the education is increasing, but the kind of economy we have, we are moving towards this kind of service sector oriented economy, and then we really don't, if we really don't train them towards the towards the higher technical degrees, then it really doesn't make much sense, because the we are not capturing the economic boom, and then at the same time, if we are not actually making a growth in manufacturing sector, then those who are not, because again it is because of the heterogeneity in the society, this higher education has not really penetrated among the most of the section of the society, and then they are being semi-literate. They don't really find a lucrative job in this service sector oriented growth, and that is where and then the quality of education is also remained poor. So even if we have a demographic advantage, but our education or health policies or the the excludability has really not helped us helped us to reap the benefit of demographic dividend. Yeah. So in demographic dividend we have two stages. The first demographic dividend is the first stage of demographic dividend. I will just write it like this here to save time. So the first demographic dividend is when it boosts because of this declining fertility, faster decline in fertility as compared to mortality being already down. It boosts the per capita income or the economy. Yes, but it is transitory, it's temporary, because the with the development the we will move further, and then this natural growth will not be there again, the fertility rate will come down, so our demographic development will no more be there. So this is a transitory period, and if it is and then what happens if the income per consumption, because now when we have here income per consumption is high at this period, income per consumption is high, but income per consumption will drop in future, and that's a concern, right? So to make amend for that concern, we have second demographic dividend. In this second demographic dividend talks about savings. Yes, why savings is required? Because the mortality is low, life expectancy high, so people will live longer time, and it's better that they save for their own future, own elderly period, and because if they are saving, they will keep the money, invest the money, which again these financial institutions or the government can reinvest in a productive way. So in that way, the second and then if we can actually utilize this second demographic dividend properly, then the second demographic dividend is permanent, because with this high savings rate and all, we have a higher asset per income per consumer, as well as this investment and reinvestment, and this cycle keeps getting the oil and then keep moving. So and therefore we should have an accumulated savings, or accumulated savings or assets, and it also depends the kind of family transfer a particular household has, or the kind of pension they get, that also determines their savings habit, or the kind of again family transfer, like from their children and all, or their ancestral properties. So and it all determines the habit of savings, the behavior towards savings, and that will together will determine that how effective that second demographic dividend or the demographic dividend overall will be working or not. Because and this working towards planning towards second demographic dividend should start when people look at when people are working. Now as we are talking about the population's composition, population rise, population decrease, all these things and its economic impact. So there remains a question that whether population increase is good or not. So population, whether population rise is good for development. Malthus, Thomas Malthus, he was a priest in 1798, just when this the industrial revolution is happening. During this industrial revolution, or just before industrial revolution, England was characterized with the similar situation, with inadequate food and all, high mortality. Yeah. So he said that population growth is not good for the development. Yes, and this particular school, Malthusian school, is known as pessimist school. I'll just go to a different slide, and we'll say this debate of population growth versus development has basically three schools. The number one is pessimist. Second, optimist. Third, neutral. The pessimist says it's not good, negative. Optimist says positive. Neutral is zero, so they don't bother, right? So what this pessimist says as Malthusian view or Malthus, that industrial revolution is not good at all for the economy, and then there should be a check. And then he said, see why it's not good, sorry, the population growth is not good. He says why it is not good, because the population size increases in geometrical progression, yeah, in geometrical progression, while the, or in the exponential rate, yeah, I will say in exponential rate, while food production increases in arithmetic progression. So what we see that over the time, or our food production will increase like this, and our population production, I mean population growth, will increase like this. So after a certain while we may not have enough food and we have a shortage of food, and that's not good for the society, right? So so that's what he says, that we need to have checks. Now when he talk about the checks, he was as a priest, so he never supported this, and then back those ages he never supported this contraceptions and all. So he said there are two kinds of checks, one is positive check and one is negative check. Check is the ways to control the population size, the positive check and negative check. The positive checks are basically the famines, wars, diseases which will decrease the population, a lot of mortality, right? Whereas the negative checks are celibacy, delaying marriage, all these behavioral, but not contraception. Yes, so these are the positive checks are famine, war, this is celibacy, delayed marriage, and that is how they should control the population, and that is how they should decrease the, at least decrease the population size or fertility level. Yeah, the mortality is also always very high at that time. So it's like the positive check, the negative check. The negative check is basically out of the moral restraint. Yeah. So what the criticism says that this theory is too simplistic, and then it has not taken any scientific development in its under its consideration. So there comes the optimistic approach. The optimistic approach is led by the Bostrup, Esther Bostrup, yeah, in only 1965, and she says that necessity is the mother of invention. When we see the struggle, that we don't have enough food, we will intervene, invention, yeah, we will intervene and we will invent something. So, and there comes the science. So then that's what happened in India as well during Green Revolution, after these famines and all, just after independence, Bengal famine, Bihar famine in 1960s, late 1960s and 1970s, we see that Green Revolution which increased the and then we saw white that's different. Anyways, we saw the Green Revolution, then that increased the productivity, the agricultural production by a large margin, multiple folds. So, and then she discusses the technology. If the population is high and there is a requirement, people are intelligent, so they will bring in technology, and the technology will solve the problem. And based on the problem in a particular society, the intensity of new methods will be determined, that how intensive will it be. So again, the Bostrup's theory's first limitation or drawback was that it can only be adopted by a small community, and it can really, and every particular population has different ideologies, different level of development. So the invention capability is also limited in some population, and if there is an overpopulation, there is a chaos, and then the technology is a capital intensive, it can be capital intensive. So, and that technology, bringing the technology may also be challenged because of overpopulation. So there it has its own limitation, whereas the neutral view, in Julian Simon, Ehrlich, Paul Ehrlich, they actually supported this Malthusian view, but at the same time they said that there is demographic dividend which can eventually help us. Some schools, say Rome schools and I mean Club of Rome, say they said that the resource utilization is a challenge because of these the Club of Rome, yeah. Because of this current trend, if the resource utilization is not managed properly or regulated properly, that can create a havoc, and people may face, the future generations may face heavy difficulty to find their own resources to survive. But at the same time, again, this technology may intervene and bring in a global equilibrium. So this is the neutral view which talks about both the positive side and then the negative side of this population growth. Now, we will basically we have been in this session have been discussing on the the population and the population change, the composition, the population size, and its impact on development. Once we were discussing about this, the population size and its demographic variables such as birth rate and death rate. So the once the death is a technology or the advancement, scientific advancements, but the birth is purely a rational behavior or often irrational, but that is in the back days. Today, with the awareness, with the understanding, birth rate with the lower mortality rate, birth rate is a rational choice. Even in the lower level of development, birth rate can be a rational choice. Now the birth rate means the family size, yeah, can be a rational choice, and these rational choices are often because every individual is an economic agent, and an economic agent will be rational in nature, and then the fertility behavior of an individual or of a household, of a family, of a couple is directly associated with their economic aspirations, or so they will determine the number of child looking at the their economic aspirations. Now, so these theories are known as fertility or socio-economic theories of fertility. And these socio-economic theories are of basically broadly two groups. One is social and another one is economic. Yeah, in social theories, we have social capillary theory. By Dumont back in 1890, then theory of change and response by Kingsley Davis in 1963, and then theory of diffusion and cultural change. Diffusion and cultural change by Carlson, C. Carlson. Anyways, so what these theories tell? These theories talk about the sociology or the social impact. Social capillary theory says this is a capillary action. The lower, the smaller is the family size, the faster will be the movement, upward movement, right? That is the movement towards development, or they will be able to achieve larger level of economic aspirations, yeah, or consumer demand. So social capillary theory says when a family realizes that we'll smaller the family size and we can achieve a social height, in terms of economic achievement, then they can opt for this smaller family size. But it is oversimplistic and really doesn't, because the society is so rigid, they don't really change overnight or even over a period of time. So it takes time. So there was the first first theory or related to fertility theories. Then Kingsley Davis talk about the theory of change and response, which is primarily that when a particular community changes with the urbanization, that they see that the number of family size has decreased, so I mean number of death has decreased, so the number of children are increasing, so and we are finding it difficult to manage. So the well of people who are aware, they will decrease the family size, and because they decrease the family size, they uplift themselves in the societal hierarchy, and then slowly this will be looked at and changed. The behavioral pattern will also be changed or transfused towards the underprivileged section, poorer, and then the children. The same is the theory of diffusion and cultural change or cultural lag. That is, first one particular culture, the will of urban rich people change, and then slowly it moves to the poorer people. So these two are theory of change and response, and diffusion and cultural change are almost similar. Yeah. Whereas in terms of economic theories, we have prominently three theories. One is Liebenstein's theory, another one is Gary Becker's theory, and then the third one is Caldwell's theory, Easterlin's theory. So we'll discuss one by one. The first one will discuss about Liebenstein's cost utility theory. Yeah. So Liebenstein's economic theory of fertility. So what it says that they said that it's a cost utility analysis simply. Yeah. So and this cost utility analysis, based on this cost children's number, Liebenstein tries to do a cost utility analysis. He says that children will have two types of costs. One is direct cost and indirect cost. Yeah. Whereas children, these are the costs, and the benefits, they will have multiple benefits. Yes, these benefits can be a consumption benefit, the satisfaction. This can be an economic benefit. This can be a security benefit at the elderly and old age and all. So broadly we will keep like this. Yeah, three benefits. So what we see that in terms of say if we try to plot them graphically, what we find is this is the development or economic development of the fertility of the family. This is the maybe the number of child, or we'll first keep the cost and benefits. And then the cost increases with the number of child and with the economic development, because the more the children, they will try to invest more and more. So and then this is my consumption benefit. I will just write CB. This is my cost. This is my cost curve, and this is my consumption benefit, which is which remains same for a poor family and for a rich family. The same kind of benefit for each child they will have. So I mean the satisfaction, the life, the love, the affection. Yes, what we find is that the economic benefit will come down with the development. Yes, and social benefit should also come down. But it will be higher, because even if they are rich, but they will still depend upon their children at the elderly, because they are psychologically weak, so it can be eventually like this. Not anything, yeah. So or you can, it varies from place to place or the society to society, you can keep economic benefit like this, and then your social benefit like very close to each other. So it really doesn't matter. And then you will choose whether at which point your cost and benefit are matching, together the total benefits. So this is the social benefit, this is the economic benefit, and then the total cost. So, and you will not, with the higher the development, you won't go for the large number of children, you won't increase the child size or the family size. Yeah, that's primarily because your cost is more, you are investing more. When the number of when your benefit at the lower level of economic development, your benefit is more. The second one is Baker's theory, Gary Baker theory, and he says that it's a quality quantity trade-off. Quality quantity trade-off. So, and he assumes that couples behave rationally, and so they are economic agent, couples have perfect knowledge, children are consumption good, and quantity of children is based upon money invested. That means if I invest a lot of money to get my children educated and for better health, I will keep my number of child limited. So higher the quality, lower is the quantity. If my I don't really want to spend more on the quality of the child, don't want to send them in high big schools, or I don't really want them to educate, and I don't really want to spend for their immunization and all these things, I'm not investing for their better health. That means children are my productive agent, and I don't really bother about the quantity. Quantity will be high. So though lower the quantity, higher the quality. Higher the quantity, lower the quality. That is known as quality quantity trade-off in by Baker. Yeah. So, and then the final one is Easterlin's theory, and Easterlin's theory basically talks about the contraception use, and what he says that this is again it's like it depends upon demand of the children, potential supply of children, and actual children, actual number of children. So this is CD, this is CN, and this is CA. So if we plot graphically, what we find, this is the over here, this is the quantity, or this is my demand curve which comes down. So it remains same, and with the development it comes down, and this is my potential supply. So this is my CD. This is my potential supply, which goes up and up, and after a certain while, that is called Hutterite population, it doesn't increase anymore, and this is my actual supply. So I don't have idea about contraception, I don't have idea about the development, so it will go up with the with the supply, and then once I get the knowledge, I get the idea about contraception, it falls down and follow the actual supply. So this is my actual supply, and at the lower level where the demand and supply is high, at the lower level of development, so the total number of children will be here, but at then with the economic development, the total number of children will be here. and then the number of children will be lower. So this is about, it doesn't follow with the development potential. Supply is not being followed. It is being followed with the realization, awareness, and use of contraception. They will finally focus upon the actual supply and where the demand and actual supply will match, and then the actual supply will match the demand, and then slowly it will come down. So this kinds of graph is known as Lorentz curve. Uh, Lorentz curve, which shows the income inequality, so this is the cumulative percentage, and then their income share, then this is the cumulative income, and it's actually the graphical explanation of Gini coefficient. If this part is A and this part of B, then it can be A by A plus B, but this is not basically this is the simplest formula of Gini coefficient, but this is how we can estimate the income inequality. Yeah. Lecture number 18. So here in this YLD, when we estimate the the disability adjusted life year, in this case, as over here we have seen that this component, this is not the totally, maybe so you can see from here to here is under bracket and this is outside the bracket. This part is outside the bracket, and over here when I estimate this, I will not. So if I write down the entire thing, then it will be e to the power minus, avoid confusion, L plus A minus R plus beta, L plus A minus 1 minus e to the power minus R plus beta to A, and minus R plus beta into A minus 1 and plus 1 minus k by r 1 minus e to the power minus r l. So this is outside the bracket of this, but together this d is within. Yes, so this is the total equation. Yeah, so here this part there is no d of the disability, so this is outside, and over here this entire component goes inside, and then it's d. Yeah, yeah. Thank you very much. So this is all about our economic development and lecture, and this is the end of this course of health economics. I wish you all the best. Stay happy. Thank you very much.